Sorry. Yeah, I remember you said that.
And we have 2 candidates. So that's great.
Good.
Both seem very qualified.
Oh, good.
That.
Let's separate. I won't make you listen to my stapler.
Well, that's Ron. Okay.
Hi, Ron.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Michael and John Sasso.
Oops.
Okay, should we wait another minute or looks like it's 7:01 now?
Yeah, I'll give him another minute.
Okay.
How many more do you need?
Well, we just have enough now. We
Oh,
have 4.
you've got a quorum? Okay.
Yes. All right. I'll declare the meeting open and we'll start with taking attendance. And first, let's get Ron Assini.
Yep.
And John Parsons,
Here,
Mark Doxer,
Here.
John O'Neill here, John Sasso, don't believe, and Michael Coltman. All right. So next item of business is I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the January 26th meeting. And this would just be the Reading Center for Active Living Committee meeting.
so moved.
So moved by John. I have a second.
Second.
Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes as presented? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Mark keeps me on my toes, so I gotta look for that nodding of the head. Okay, Ron Assini,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
Michael Coltman, John Parsons,
Yes,
John O'Neill, yes. And John Sasso, I believe, is still not here. But quorum being present and all being ayes, that the minutes have been accepted. So then we'll go on to the next item. And that is the follow-up with the meeting with the Council on Aging. And are there any thoughts? This is, I mean, just so that is everybody clear, this is just the meeting, though everybody's welcome, obviously, to participate in any public meeting. But this is a meeting of the Reading Center for Active Living. All right.
Sorry, John. I just wanted to let everyone know I'm going to be recording this meeting.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just going to start it now.
All right, and just before then, somebody had just raised their.
That's Mark.
Recording in progress.
Mark, okay.
So what I was going to kind of add is that John Parsons, myself, and obviously Marilyn Shapley and Barbara Mellinson as well were at the Council on Aging meeting last night. And one of the things that I think we recalc were hoping is that we could add some new themes to our list of the things that we thought were relevant, that we want to make sure, as we're speaking with the consultant and thinking about some options, we have a reasonably good list. And as I thought it through, I have some scribbles all over the place, but I think that there were 5 things that kind of stood out. One was to assure that there's a bathroom on each floor. And whether that's assumed or not, let's just make sure it's clear. Number 2, capabilities to assist hearing impaired participants in activities. Number 3 was a reception area. And we talked a little bit about having some space for that, but this came up again. Again, I'm kind of working off scribbles here. 2 other things were mentioned: a library resources room. And I was thinking originally that, well, kind of we have a library, but the library resources room, I think, could have other things. For example, tax materials, other relevant information, specific things that are going on, other things that have taken place at the center in the past. There could be a lot of other resources that would go there that are very relevant to the center. And the 5th item was a rehab pool to be considered on the list also. So those were the additions to the list that we had already shared with them, as I heard it. John, anything else you wanna add?
No, you listed them all.
I was glad to see that you had something as far as the hearing impairment, because I am hearing impaired. And I know at meetings, especially like a town meeting, I have often have very difficulty, a lot of difficulty with especially the legal counsel, who tends to turn away from the mic, which doesn't help when he's after he's been asked a question. And I've actually gone up to the town moderator a couple of times and told him that, if things didn't improve, I'd have to ask for some sort, for what you call COT transcript, that so people would actually be able to visually see what's being said. But so it's certainly something I'm glad we're attuned with. Was there anything else, Marilyn? Sure.
Am I allowed to speak?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. The hearing impairment is one that caused me, I mentioned emails at the beginning, to send off a flurry of emails to John and Mark to make sure that got onto the agenda. I worked for the Commonwealth and was fortunate enough to be invited to a 3-hour training today on what the ADA requirements are for helping the hearing impaired and deaf. And in addition to just sort of going through the laws, he shared a tremendous amount of information about the technology that's available today. They can do things now, like they put some sort of, it must be a wire, something in the floor of a room, and the speaker is connected to something that through that wire, it'll automatically transmit in text to a handheld device or audio to hearing aids through, I think it's a Bluetooth type connection. It was really exciting. And of course, the man presenting was deaf himself, so he knew of what he spoke. And I'm going to follow up with him and see if I can get him to do, well, ideally, he's a busy man. So the odds that he could come down to our humble little Council of Aging meeting are probably small, but I'll bet he's got videos or something he can point us to that I'm hoping to put on the agenda for an upcoming Council on Aging meeting, because he's making the point that, this stuff, first place, it's not up to the individual who's hard of hearing to have to ask for this stuff. It's up with public organizations and buildings, it's up to the organization to make it available. So, and everyone needs to know it's available. Yes, they might need to ask for a piece of equipment or something, but it's not provided just because they found out someone needed to do it. It needs legally to be available and people can choose to access it. And he used the analogy. He said, you know, someone in a wheelchair, we would never expect them to bring their own wheelchair ramp to the town hall to get in. You know, it's just understood. We have to have equipment to accommodate basic disabilities. And hearing, he said that, I didn't write down fast enough the number, but I believe he said it was about a third of people age 65 are already seriously hearing challenged. And by 80, he said it's a sound 50%. So that's huge population. And one of the other things he pointed out, and I'll shut up in a second, because this is your meeting, but since I obviously have an audience that is interested, he was saying that, oh, and I lost my train of thought here.
You're talking about percentages of people who are seriously
Yeah,
80
it's
plus,
really
yeah.
big percentage. And I just lost my train of thought, but it was just really exciting. I mean, he wasn't there just to wag his finger at us and say, you should all be doing better. He had tons of information about equipment that's available, and especially if you're creating a new building, I think is when it gets really exciting. It did also occur, oh, I know what the other one was. Apparently Zoom has capability of having captioning so that the speaker, whatever you're saying, would be captioned on the screen. Do we have that ability? It should be in every Zoom that we're running.
Yeah, the host should be able to turn that on. That's always available.
Okay. It's something we should put out there with invitations and just let people know. You know, we do have this option. Let us know if you need it turned on, or else just plain turn it on these things. And again, it gets back to it's up to the organization to make things available. It's not up to the individual one by one to have to come and say, gee, can you help me out? There we go. That's wonderful. Thank you. The other thing, and then I will stop, is it also occurred to me, which is what prompted the second email, as I got more and more excited. It was such a good training session. He got me thinking about whatever we do to do surveys and focus groups. We need to make sure that we have whatever we can give them for technology or supports. Could even be having a sign language person in these meetings so that we're not excluding the 30% of the 65-year-olds and the 50% of the 80-year-olds from the dialogue because they can't hear us. And I don't recall seeing any evidence of that when UMass did the last study, but that was quite a few years ago. But now, I mean, I think it just should be a given in the planning. And for those who are blind, this was the Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing today. So he made a few mentions of blindness, but not much. It was not his area of expertise. But I have to believe there are comparable issues there. And I did just a little bit of browsing about, you know, sending out things that have Braille on them. I mean, when's the last time we sent out a town notice in Braille? We need to think about these things for the elderly population in particular, but although not exclusively. So I'm off my soapbox, but I just wanted to make sure that this got considered because it was just such an exciting meeting. I mean, it was totally just, here's stuff you can do to help a big significant part of your population that has these challenges. And, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. Well, even though it does, because the law says it does, but because we want to, we can do it. So I'll stop now. Thank you.
And we've got a note for the record that John Sasso is in attendance. Anybody else have any? Yes, Amy?
Mark again, sorry.
Mark.
Marilyn reminded me of one other thing too that we also talked about at the meeting, which was the ability to expand I don't know what they're called specifically, but the emergency alert buttons into a mobile or satellite capable system as opposed to land or only in-home based. And it was discussed, I think, a little bit that, yes, we may even have an option on that now, but it either isn't working well enough or it's not doing what it needs to do. So to explore that further.
Yes. Marilyn again?
Oh, and one other, Mark, I mentioned at the meeting, that we're looking into virtual reality technology. This actually really accessible virtual reality technology that there's all kinds of ways that it can be helpful to, great, there it is, to senior citizens, especially someone who's homebound. You can put those on, and if your kids have them on and they're on some trip, you can't travel far these days, but they made it to the Grand Canyon or whatever, you can be there in real time with them through these kinds of things. And it's something that, by the same token, once we've done some research, could be a good candidate for possibly having it in the future recalc setting, but also is something that, like the lifelines, might be equipment that we can help subsidize for people. So it could change the quality of life for an elderly person who's isolated very easily. So.
I think Barbara had her hand up too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. I talked to Lifeline today regarding the buttons, and they have what's called Go Safe 2. And it's a little bit of an upgrade, but what it does is it enables a person to go out in their yard and still feel safe because the button is effective. Whereas the other at-home buttons are only effective if you're in the house. And there are a lot of seniors now that are more mobile than they used to be at that age. And they're outdoors often, simply in their yard, wherever they're heading. They can go to the supermarket and know that their button is going to work. It has a GPS tracking system in it. It also has a fall alert, so that should a person fall, it will trigger the lifeline. So they've certainly been upgraded in the last few years.
Anyone else? Okay. So the next item on the agenda is discuss the March Select Board and Town Meeting updates. Well, okay, we'll do that, and then there's one other thing after that on the new business. So we were handed this timeline. I'm not sure how it was created and what the thinking was as far as the relationship of the consultant, coming on board and having a chance to interface with them and begin the process of gathering information from a broader segment of the population. So Mark, can you speak to that as far as what's the actual expectation for the March presentation to Select Board and then the April to the town meeting?
So I think the goal is to provide an update as to where we are, what's going on, what progress have we made, what's our plan going forward, what do we hope to do? And I think the next piece would be what we hope to be able to bring to town meeting for November. So, clearly we don't have a complete plan laid out, but we know that the consultant is here, and maybe what we should do is let Jean, if you could update us as to kind of what the timeline is for things. And we probably need to think a little bit about what input we want to have to the consultant, and then what the consultant timeline is likely to be. And we share that with the Select Board because we are a group that reports to the Select Board. And then I think the hope would be that probably, John, if you're interested in volunteering as the chair of Recalc, to offer an update to town meeting, which probably would be in two forms. One is a document, because I don't know what format town meeting is going to be in at this point, but assuming it's hybrid, perhaps, probably a document with kind of information for all of town meeting, and then a verbal presentation as well. So I think that's kind of what we had in mind. That's what I had in mind anyway.
Right. Well, that's why I'm a bit surprised that the consultant's been on board for 2+ weeks. I was hoping that they would at least have an initial, check-in with us today and I still have no sense of when things are going to happen. And so I really feel like, how can that's an integral part of any planning process. and as part of our charge. And so I'm a little bit of a loss as to how we're proceeding at this moment. Yes, Jean.
Okay. So the consultant, as you know, the bid opening was in late January, a couple of weeks ago. And we awarded the contract and got all the contracts signed. And we have a staff level meeting to kick off the project next week. So that's pretty quick for government to only be 2-3 weeks with getting documents signed and getting things off the ground. So we're very pleased to be moving forward with the UMass Center, the Center for Gerontology, that will be doing the work outlined in the scope that the Recalc board saw, I think it was in December. So I think we are moving right along. The consultant's work is, as we've discussed, is a little bit different than what, in my opinion, than what Recalc is doing. The consultant is really focused on community engagement. And so that's maybe one piece of the puzzle. But I think for the charge of Recalc to think about a center for active living and kind of the dialogue that's been ongoing, identifying some of the goals of what a active living center could be and some of the ideas that have been discussed. But this consultant effort is really going to be reaching into the community and getting feedback. The March Select Board meeting is March 1st, which is in 2 weeks. And then March 1st and March 22nd. So if the idea is to have somebody from Recalc, which is what I understood it to be, that whether it's the chair or whoever, someone representing Recalc, go to the select board and provide an update on the work of the committee, then that would be something that would need to get on the agenda. And I don't know if I've seen a couple of draft agendas and I haven't seen that on there. So it would, I guess, having the conversation of who would do that and what the content would be the first step. And then seeing about getting on the agenda for the March or select board, either of the 2 dates. And then town meeting, as you know, starts the end of April. And it's my understanding that the town moderator needs to be consulted. And you have to get the permission of the town moderator to have the report included. And it was my understanding that there's mostly written reports now, not, I think a few years ago, I don't know if it's since the pandemic, but from what I understood, the written report was the way we've been going with updates from committees. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yes, John Sasso.
Thanks, John. So just a couple things here. First, Jean, just curious, what specific inputs would be valuable or necessary at this point to provide to the consultant? I mean, we've had a lot of discussions around, I mean, the way in which we engage the community, different mediums, some of the information that we've been talking about. I'm just curious, to what extent is there, I guess I'll say, even a more immediate deliverable that we need to put in front of or provide to the consultant to give some more guidance to what they're going to be doing? I guess that's my first question.
The meeting with Kevin and I are going to be meeting with the consultant next week. So we'll have a clearer picture after that meeting on a more detailed work plan and how we're going to coordinate this work that the consultants hired to do out of the public services budget for the Public Services Department and how that dovetails with the recalc committee. So we'll have a clearer picture after that.
So I guess, John, my first suggestion would be that, unless I'm reading this wrong and somebody else can jump in, I certainly thought that part of our charter was to help that process. And it sounds like, we've obviously been having meetings now for, a couple of weeks, and we've solicited information from COA, and we've had some informational discussions about other centers. And I think we have a pretty good list and set of content that I don't think we've put it together in a cohesive fashion. But certainly I think we have some value that I think we could provide. And I think, to the point of what are we going to tell the select board? I think that would be one of the things I would like us to be able to share, is that, here's what we've done for the last, 6 or 8 weeks. And here's the information that we passed along to the consultant for their input as part of their engagement activity. Here's the kind of the summary pieces that we've been working on and looking at. And maybe even I'll throw in my 2 cents, a little plug at the end to say, while it's not in the scope of our thing to look at more immediate things, we think that perhaps the select board should consider providing some support to the COA and coming up with some more short-term things that kind of like we've talked about. So that would be my perspective, John. I think if that's the case, though, we do need to come up with a way to collate and consolidate and summarize what we have, so we can put it in a form that can be valuable input, and also kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It also then kind of gives us the content of the report that we would provide to town meeting to say, hey, this is what we've been doing, and here's the information we've collected. So that's my thoughts, John. I'm certainly interested in other committee members' perspectives.
Yes, Mark.
Thanks, John. So a couple of quick things just to talk about timing. So I'm looking at our charter, and it says that we'll report to the select board before annual town meeting. So I think that realistically means either March 22nd or April 19th. So I don't think we need to worry about March 1st, but March 22nd or 4/19 would both hit those, would kind of achieve that. Second is that, again, back to the charter, our charter, there are a couple of things here that are pretty clear. Excuse me. One is that it talks about the consultants, and to talk about community resource planning, community engagement. And then for recalc, it says 1, collect data and information from communities that have successfully navigated the senior/community center planning process. 2, articulate a vision of a community center and conduct extensive community engagement to determine if residents desire a 60+ center for active living or a multi-generational center. Those are kind of the 2 biggies that are up there for specifics that we're supposed to do. So I think that's what we should kind of aim ourselves at and think about. Okay, what's our process to date? Are we getting ourselves toward delivering on those 2? What will we be able to tell the select board by end of March, early April about our process? I do think that to your point, John Sasso, kind of, I think it's important that we do understand a timeline from the consultant and have some ability to kind of work what we need into that requirement. I think that's pretty kind of implicit in our charter here as well. And then to take it forward from there. To Jean's point, that's not the whole thing. That's just one of the pieces of the puzzle. And we, as a group, we've gone out, and I know different people have either visited senior centers in other communities or talked about senior centers in other communities. And I think we need to probably organize that a lot more and think about, in particular, this issue of senior center, community center, and visit some of each, talk about some of each, and make sure that we're bringing that information forward. The expectation eventually, before we sunset and before November town meeting, is that we will have a recommendation on what to do for the town. And the ideal, I guess, would be to go back to town meeting with a specific request we want to do X and we're going to need Y dollars to get there. Or Y dollars is the next step to get there. Oh, and last thing on I think that the written reports, certainly in the age of COVID and Zoom, everything has become written only. But I think that I don't know that that was a policy other than specific to Zoom activities. I think that that's kind of when it changed, but I don't know what Alan has in mind. It's his call, the town moderator.
So was the idea that it would be a representative from Recalc leading a presentation at these meetings?
Again, somewhat up to us, and also coming back to the select board and see what other people's expectations are. I can only kind of speak for myself on that, but I think the expectation was to start building a rapport with town meeting about what's happening, that this group is meeting and gathering and trying to put together and bring some answers, I'll call it recommendations, back to town meeting for November. I think that if we look at the timing on the end, okay, Recalc should provide regular updates to the select board during the process. Sunset on or before November 30th, and it can be extended. So that, I think that was the expectation, is kind of progress at April and ideally a bit more of a milestone for November.
What are people's thoughts as far as how much we need to have gathered prior to that select board meeting, and how do we make sure that we have sufficient information to be able to provide some guidance to the select board? Yeah, Ron?
So I'm getting a little confused here as a newbie to this process, but we've talked a lot about what's required, how we can have a better community center. We've made a list, and now we're going to get input from a consultant. Doesn't it make sense to talk to the consultant, have that person go out, go get the community feedback, match it up with what we have, see where the gaps are, and present it to town meeting? That's the way I look at it. We know what we want. We've talked about it for 5 meetings. We've talked about all the things that we could add. Am I missing something? Yes,
Mark?
So Ron, I think that's perfect as it relates to the senior center side of the equation.
Sure.
But I'm not sure that we've addressed that for more of the community center aspect of it.
Oh, I thought we did put stuff in there for community center. I think we did say it would be multi-purpose room, could use it for after hours.
Recreation committee.
Recreation committee could be using it. What alternative sites could be used as well too? At least I remember some of that, but maybe it wasn't grand enough. Mark, or the vision wasn't big enough for,
Well, I'm just
that we're
thinking
looking
that I haven't, I don't know if we have explored other of these joint community centers that are catering to both 60 plus and below,
that
to
I
really
agree.
get a feel for the kinds of things that go on there and the dynamics and the pros and the cons and things like that. I don't feel like I have that. I don't think that as a group we have that yet. And I
Yeah.
think that is part of the charter.
Yeah, to me, that is, but it gets to Ron's point. How do we get at, or how do we have some solid information as opposed to our opinions on that process that other communities have undertaken, as far as the whole issue and how they've come down on that issue, as far as a center for people of all ages, as opposed to just a new senior center? And that's where I've, all along that I've been struggling with that, and how we get to there. Because I think that's, I've felt all along, I think we've talked about it, is that if we're going to get something that's going to be worthwhile for seniors, it's going to be important to.
I'm not sure I understand.
Who was that? Who spoke up? No, okay, so,
Maybe it was, sorry, it might have been the closed captioning.
oh, okay. That we need to have broad support from the community, and one of the ways of getting broader support is to see how, the value that as many people as possible can get from this new center.
I mean, to me, we've just got to get out there and start talking to other centers, whether it be on the phone or in person, and how else are you going to find out? And I agree with what Mark said. We got to get going on this. Whether we have enough people to do it all, I don't know. I'll suggest to Marilyn that she get some of the people on the council to maybe assist in this.
I took before I started my most recent job, because I knew I was going to not have daytime anymore, I actually took a whirlwind tour and went to, I think it was 5 different senior centers, and spoke to the directors of all of them. And Amy and Nancy and I met at length with the one in Linfield, but I spoke with others and they were very willing to talk. It really just takes getting in a car and doing it. And I have information I could share on the 5 I've been to already. And some of them were ones that are just senior centers, and some of them were ones that are community centers. It's a simple dialogue to get going. I can't force people on the council to volunteer their time, John. And you saw at the vote the other night, everyone's big on ideas and short on time and energy to go do things. I do my best. Actually, I'm thinking about running an event to try to recruit new volunteers, because we have great ideas. We need energy, and the current council does not have a lot of people who are in a position to go out and do what we need done. So finger pointing doesn't get us too far. We need more people, and we're looking to do something like a coffee hour somewhere outside the Pleasant Street Center, so we won't run into any issues with overloading the Pleasant Street Center, and asking for volunteers and having some information. We might even ask Recalc to come and speak as well, so they could get the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish. But we're doing what we can. I wish it were more, but we just don't have a big crew of people who seem motivated to follow up on these things right now. But as I say, in 2 days, a couple hours a day, I hit 5 senior centers. It's not hard. And they're happy to talk.
Right.
I wasn't suggesting that you could appoint people, but maybe you could twist an arm or two.
I don't know.
See, I'm thinking of a more structured approach whereby we have the same list of questions, and including that is square footage, things like that, so that things that can be measured across, all the different places. And starting with, I'd like to have an exact breakdown of the square footage of every room within the current senior center. Because like one of my ideas is to say, what's the typical classroom size in Reading? For high school, middle school, maybe even, kindergarten. And I think it might come up with an interesting comparable, considering, we don't want to have any more than 22 students in a classroom. What's that size compared to what we're trying to have hundreds of, serve hundreds, if not thousands of people in the center that we have with this square footage? I mean, there are things but we need, I think this is one of the things that John Sasso had been reminding us from the beginning, is we need some, definitely some definite measurables, so that then once we have some of those, then it can translate into cost per square footage and things like that down the road when you're thinking about a budget. And then when you're thinking about a budget, it includes what's the staffing support that you're going to need and all those kinds of things. But we're nowhere near there. But to get this off the ground, how do we? I'm a big believer that groups don't produce these kind of things. at a meeting. Yes, Ron.
So, but is that our charge in this case? Or is it our charge to recommend an updated senior center / community center with these type of amenities that the community is asking for? I mean, getting to square footage and everything like that.
Well, no, I was saying the square footage to say that, if 10 comparable communities have, twice as larger facilities as we.
Agreed.
That kind of thing.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Not to get, not for
Yeah.
the sake
And,
of.
and I agree to see it visually, and to feel it and understand it and sit in it is what is really will, I think, address a lot of the things that we're missing, because we're conceptualizing a lot here, but not physically seeing anything. We have the Reading Senior Center as one reference point, but Marilyn, it's great that you went out to 5 senior centers. There's other centers out there. You have a better perspective than us. So I agree. We have to go out and get that perspective and visit some other centers of other communities who have updated their centers.
I think John has his hand up.
Pardon me?
John Sasso has his.
Oh,
John
okay.
Sasso.
For whatever reason, I only see certain people.
You got to expand your
Okay.
screen.
Yeah.
I apologize. I thought it wasn't at the last meeting because it was the joint meeting, but the meeting before, we had 2 actions I thought that came out of that meeting, and maybe I should go back and look at the notes. But one was that there existed today reviews or summaries or documents that were generated by other centers in their journey to get to where they were, and that information existed, but we just had to kind of pull it out. We had to go contact those communities, and they've already done that. To Mark's point, they've already done their process, and normally part of those processes include, while Ron, it may not necessarily be something that we're adept at doing. That process most likely did include some sort of a requirement analysis for certain numbers of rooms, certain amount of square footage, certain facilities like bathrooms, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that was one of the actions to see if we could get a hold of any of those reports and proposals that were done. And I think that would be really helpful, because it would give us a starting point for the type of work and analysis that will ultimately need to be done and translated to Reading. And then the second part of that, and I remember volunteering to go out and see some of these and see what they ended up with based on what that process was. So I guess I thought, and again, with everything going on, that seemed to have been dropped off the list, but I did think that we had the action to get in touch with a few centers and connect some of us. At the time, we were still in the middle of a much more drastic outbreak. And so we decided that, well, maybe it wasn't going to be a good thing to go that week, but that at least make the connection and then, let us all know, okay, yes, the Linfield Center is willing to host us, who wants to go. But I think John O'Neill raises an excellent point, which is we should have a list of questions or items that we would, no matter who goes, that we should get a standard set of answers to, so we can kind of do some comparative as well. So I think, again, I recall that being an action, and I think we should do that. And that would, I think, give us a significant amount of the material we need to answer the first question, which is, what does that process look like, and how would we bring it here, and what have some of these other places looked at? The second thing I want to raise before I lose this thought. So, and maybe I've something I really hadn't thought about. So, a lot of the stuff that we've collected to date has been primarily focused on senior center input, but not exclusively. But I was curious. So, because I was just talking about we need to provide some feedback and input to the consultant. I still think that's an important thing that we can do, is collect up certain information, because as we said, we want to tell the consultant, we want to give people the the conceptual view of what to answer and not let them think about a blank piece of paper. So so I think having that feedback from our standpoint as input to that would be helpful. But the question I asked is, so is this going to be a community-wide all across the ages survey, or is it only going to be focused on, seniors above 60? Because if the answer is we want to get some feedback about a multi-generational versus a senior center, then we kind of have to open it up beyond just the senior view. At least that would be my perspective. So I maybe I was thinking about this all wrong. So someone please correct me. If the answer is that the intent of the consultant was broad-based and to, get information across the board, then that's one thing. But if it was really only to focus on kind of the senior side, then it leaves us a little bit blind to the question of what do we recommend, because we're not necessarily going to be in a position to get that information. So I guess I'll stop there. And
on the second point, and Gene can correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that it's the broader community. The survey is supposed to be for broader than seniors, and I see Gene's nodding her head. Is that correct, Gene?
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can look at the scope that everyone had reviewed previously. Hang on. So it's the community survey is going to be created by the consultant with input from staff and circulated widely throughout the community. That's how the scope reads. So I think that was what was decided last fall.
okay, that answers that. Thank you.
Yep.
And as far as your first point, your recollection is the same as mine, John Sasso, that we had talked about and getting information as far as that the surveys or whatever was the determining factors in decisions that a couple of communities anyway who have gone through the process already. And I thought Kevin had focused in on a couple of those, and to get the information was supposed to be the next step. And then as well, yes, there was supposed to be a number of visits that people, there would be places that we thought would be comparable communities that then people could select which one of them they were available to be able to go visit that center, either a senior center / community center or, senior center, but that then we could do that. And what we hadn't talked about, which I mentioned tonight, is I think it would be good if we had a standard set of information, of data that we want to collect on each one of the, on each visit. And I certainly would, I know John Sasso's already volunteered. I'd be, I certainly would be willing to go visit too, but I feel like, I don't want it to be this general thing. I want to have some, all right, what exactly am I looking for? I think that would be helpful to the people we visit too, that we could kind of like say, hey, here's this, you don't have to give me it all to me today, but, and maybe I could, you could even submit it to them in advance, but here's what we're looking at, how much, can you be helpful in providing, anything that you can give us would be helpful. Okay. Mark?
Thanks, John. So yes, is my quick response to everything that people have said so far. I think that we need kind of like a high level view for a second, but also the detail of exactly what are we going to do to get this done. At the very high level, I think our charge, in fact, is this. The charge of Recalc is to explore the current and future needs of the community and initiate planning for a potential new senior / community center in town that will focus on residents age 60+ and possibly other members of the community. And then let me just read on for one more sec. At the annual town meeting, $40,000 was appropriated in FY22 capital funds for the purpose of senior/community center planning. And then it talks about the consultant. So high level, I think we talk about the inputs we need. And I think we're talking about from other locations, other communities that have gone through the process. And we talked about collecting published information, conducting standard interviews, and making visits. Then kind of the community input piece, which I think is largely what we're talking about through the consultant. If that's the input, then there's some kind of discussion, and there may be other inputs too, but those are the big input pieces. There's discussion and then a recommendation. And I think that's kind of what we're supposed to do, is kind of gather the inputs and organize it, have some discussions about it, and make a recommendation at the end. I think what both Johns were saying specifically is we need to organize exactly what we want from whom and when and who, who, what, when, where, why, how. But to actually have a plan for what that looks like, I think is really important. And make sure that we're covering the places we want to. If it involves people signing up for visits, great. But we need to gather that information to give us the inputs that we want to kind of digest what we're getting. Specific to the consultant and community input, I do think it's important that we, whether it's meeting directly with the consultant or not, but kind of have a lot of input into kind of what they're going to do. It is community engagement. It is, as agreed, and Gina, as you shared on kind of the sheet, who we're going to reach out to. And we need to be able to turn that into valuable information. And I think we have talked a lot about, and John Sasso, you mentioned this, not a clean sheet of paper asking them, what do you want? But instead being much more specific in some ways, giving them some guidance on these kinds of things and asking what makes sense, what they would use, what they would like to see. And I think we need to be able to kind of spend some time in this process with the consultant, through the consultant, whatever, to make sure that that's what's going to get gathered, so that we don't have to do 2 surveys. That wouldn't make any sense at all, obviously, to make sure we're kind of getting that community input on this piece. So long story short, the specifics of the plan, what do we want to do? Who, what, when, where, why, how? And just lay it out, assign responsibilities. It may be that we do need more help to do this, and we need to talk about how to get that done, whether it's asking town meeting for help, whether it's asking other groups for help. We should talk about that.
When the time comes to go out, I could probably do 7 or 8 a week. I don't have to go play bridge at senior centers three times a week. I could go to senior centers and do something else. So I mean, I could give a ton of time doing that. I'm retired. I don't really have any other commitments except the Trails Committee and volunteering at Symphony Hall, but Symphony Hall is the evenings. So I mean, I'll just tell this group I can do a ton of that legwork when that time comes.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, using the old social work thing, is that I don't think the visits are going to be the problem. I think the first step is to develop, and this is a trickier part, especially since, using the Zoom kind of thing. Can we just get a simple survey, we don't call it questions, set of questions that no matter who goes where, we're going to get, the answers in the same format. Some of them would be very basic. Is your target group 60 plus? Is that who comes here? And maybe another question is, do you have people come from other communities? Do you make a distinction as far as, what you charge them? I mean, there are, for different activities in which there are price. So but rather than take the time to do that now, is there another way we could just come up, have a couple of people work on doing it, is guess what I'm saying? Or the other option is people can, send to me, what they think is, would be an appropriate thing, whichever I'm certainly open to. I don't I don't mind either way. So I'm looking for direction from people.
God, I think John Sasso
John-
has his hand up.
You
John,
can't see me,
okay.
John, for some reason.
No, you're always not. Yeah, I
You're
have to keep
invisible.
on using the arrow to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think one of the problems, as we talked about before, is open meeting law. So we need to be able to provide, transparency in anything we do. But I do think that, so as we were talking, I kind of like listed out, well, what are the major actions that we have here and how are we going to go accomplish these? So let's take the one you just talked about, questions for the visit. My recommendation at the moment, because we are somewhat constrained, what we did the last time is we kind of all put together some input and shared it to one person. And I think at this point, that's probably the easiest thing to do, is for each person to come up with a list of questions and then send it to somebody to consolidate, and then put forth in front of the group, so that one of the review actions would be to literally go through that consolidated list and just yay or nay, do we agree with what it is? And I think that's the first thing that we need to do. In a minute, I will say, I will volunteer to help on one of these. So let me get through the other ones first, and then you can decide how you want to parse this, John. But anyhow, I think that's the first thing. The second thing we talked about, again, was to solicit, existing information. I see that Jean put some peer community data in the chat, but I do think there are, Kevin did say there are actual reports and things out there from some of these other centers. So I think we want to go back and follow up on that action. So, and I think Kevin did agree to take that. So I would want to follow up and see, what is he able to pull from these other communities that they can share with us. And then the third thing is, once we have both of those, then we can make decisions about which sites to go to, and we can coordinate people and places to make that happen. And I certainly would like to at least have an opportunity to see one or two of them. I think it's good if everybody on the committee has a chance to at least go to something, so we all have a good perspective. So that's my perspective. The last action, which I will put back into that same boat as the first one, which is, I still think we need to come up with a way to consolidate the information that we've already collected and put it in a form that the consultant can digest and potentially give us recommendations and use to help support their activity for community engagement. And that's a bit larger than just putting a list of questions together. I know we did a nice job the other day of soliciting out a list of things that we think might be in a center, but I think there was a lot of other stuff in there that is worth kind of parsing through and projecting back to the consultant as feedback from our group. And I think that also would fall under the auspices of us all looking through that and kind of providing feedback and putting it into a consolidated list that we can then share with town staff and then with the consultant. Because in the end, if that's really going to be one of our larger inputs in terms of rationale for going back to town meeting and select board, then I think we really do want to have enough. We want to make sure all of the things that we've identified as important, and we can certainly prioritize them as well and give the consultant, let them give us feedback on, well, how much of this can we actually ask and expect to get back in terms of a survey. They have a lot more experience doing those things than I do, obviously. So I think those are the 4 actions in my mind, John, and I'd be willing to take one of the 2 consolidation actions to if people want to send me their input, and then I can put together one of those 2 to present at the next meeting that we need to set up, and then we can use that as a basis for again, questions to ask when we visit, as well as feedback and input to the consultant. So that's my
Appreciate it. But
perspective.
first, John, I'm going to ask you to take over the chair for a moment. I have to go do something right away.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any feedback on that? Jean, you have your hand
Hey,
raised?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry. So I'm thinking about the question of what's going to be provided as an update. If we're planning for the first of the two updates to be at the select board in March, that leaves about 4 weeks. And so I'm saying St. Patrick's Day would be when you'd have to have this PowerPoint presentation finished in order to get that in the select board packet for March 22nd. So that 4 week window is what I'm looking at to say, is the data collection piece that you just summarized very nicely, is that what you want to share with the select board? Or alternatively, that work can be ongoing. Is it possible that Recalc could take a bigger view and present to the select board from 20,000 feet and say, we had a needs assessment done in 2017, and the needs assessment proved out what we already knew, that we have outgrown the Pleasant Street Center. And so since then, we have been making improvements, making modifications that were outlined in the report, and thinking about what's the next step. And so Recalc was formed, and almost more like a broader update of kind of this progress of how we got here. And so Recalc was formed, and we've now brought in a consultant to really get the pulse of the community, so that we can think a lot about what we are planning for. And then in my mind, I always describe this work as pre-feasibility study work. The work that we always say when we're in projects, gee, I wish we did more on the front end to understand what the needs are for a project, especially building projects. We learned a lot about building projects in the past 12 years that I've been here. And we always look back and said, I wish we did more planning right up front. And so this is that part, that golden opportunity to do the upfront planning and ask all the right questions and engage the community long before we get into the analysis of what this could look like in a more finite sense. So I'm putting the vision hat on and saying that Recalc is really charged with creating a vision going forward. We know we have a center that we've outgrown, and we know we want something else, but we really want to make sure we're engaging the community on what people want, what ideas people have, and doing all of that planning work before we even get into the future stage, which will be a feasibility study. And to Mark's point, going before town meeting and saying we need $300,000 for a feasibility study to see how many square feet do we need and what sites are there and how could we make this work, because we know that we want this type of facility. And so maybe it's a broader overview like that, as opposed to the work that this committee is going to continue to do to collect data. I don't know. It's either option A or option B, and I'll just throw that out there.
Okay, John Sass.
So just real quick, Gene, I think what you laid out in terms of the vision side is really important to convey. Certainly, I'd be interested in hearing Mark's perspective as a board member. My only caveat would be that I also, as a town meeting member and a citizen, I would like us to also be able to, give a little bit more insight into what we're doing. And I'm not suggesting that we take everything that we've done and throw it in front of the board. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I think, almost like at the very end, a little, I'm a project manager, so bear with me, a little Gantt chart that says, okay, here are the 5 or 6 major tasks that we're working on, visit centers and collect information, just so that they see, okay, we just explained this whole story to you. So here's what we're doing and here's where we are. And I think if we kind of capture that piece, I think you're right. That's really all we're going to be able to say at that point. And I think that's at least a good perspective of at least folks get an idea of where we're heading. I just also I always like to, throw in, hey, and oh, by the way, there's actually work here that we're doing, and here's what it, kind of where it is. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
John, if I could chime in to answer
Yes.
the John. So John Sasso, I think you said it really nicely. I think it's A in terms of vision, but it's B in terms of there's concrete progress that's taken place and more to go. I think it's very important to show progress. I think if we just kind of give the vision, I think frankly, the expectation is that's why you guys were formed. I don't see anything that's happened. So I think it's both. It's not, there's no completed product per se by that time, but it's, here's what we're doing. Here is what we've done. Here is what's happening with community surveys. Here's the timeline for some of these things. And our goal is to come back to November town meeting with thoughts on, here's what we need as a next step. And here's what it's going to look like, and answering the questions that our charter said. So I think that would be my expectation. Wearing my board hat, that's my expectation of what I'm going to hear as next. And I think that if 419 is better than 322 as a date to go to the select board, I think, we can talk to the chair about that, but I suspect that's fine if that makes a difference. So I wouldn't feel completely boxed in. I think it's more important that we kind of have our act together in terms of our approach, and then share that with the board, and then ideally with town meeting, if assuming that assuming that the moderator is okay with it. So, I guess as I'm thinking through this out loud, I think it's better for us to share on 322 to the select board. That also gives time for a written report to get ready for town meeting. So that's probably what I think would be the right timeline.
And also to what Gene and Mark and John Sasso have been saying, that as important as the vision is, as far as the survey, they need to have, as we've been saying all along, if you just ask people open-ended, you're not going to get good results. There needs to be some, what's the possibilities? So I think that kind of work that we've been talking about, is important right at the outset to help shape, making sure that we have a survey that gets us further along. At the same time, the survey should 2 points: to get not only information, but engagement. That's what a good survey is going to do. Get people to talk, get people to start, what are they talking about? Another expensive thing for the town? No matter what it is, you much rather have the discussion begin as early as possible, so then you can talk to people about it, talk through it, and answer some of their questions. By the time we get to town meeting, certainly, I want to know the worst things that could come out. I hate being surprised. I don't care what the bad news is. I can take it as long as I know what it, as much of it as possible, and then you can, and then you can do your best. And if it's, your best is people don't want it, that's the will of the people, then, but we darn well better be prepared for just about everything. So getting back, John Sasso has made, very generous offer to work on 2 of the most difficult things.
Hey, Marilyn had her hand up.
Oh, Michael's here. I didn't even know you were with us, Michael. Sorry. Who had her hand up?
Thank you. I did, Marilyn.
Okay, sorry, Marilyn.
A couple of quick things. One, on the survey design, is there going to be a review and input process, or is this something just the consultants and staff are going to work on? I guess that's a question for Jean.
We haven't sat down with the consultant yet, so I haven't identified that. In all of the projects I've worked on in my 12 years in Reading, when we're working collaboratively with boards, there's always an exchange. So
Great,
I don't know what that will look like. I'll have to come back to that, but my expectation is, we didn't even go out to bid on the consultant without having this board review and approve and take a vote on the scope of work. So
right, but the Council on Aging wasn't involved in that. So I'm just raising it from that perspective. We're talking about what seniors need and our board's
Are you
not.
saying, hey, hang on, I don't think I'm following you. Are you saying that you want the Council on Aging to be involved
Yes,
in the survey design?
absolutely, please.
Well, it would be easier. I mean, we only have a fairly small budget and a very limited scope. I think I just brought it up a few minutes ago, but the number of opportunities for the consultant to be at meetings, this kind of thing where it's both boards is I think probably the most efficient way to do it, because we'll
But,
through that budget.
but this has one representative of Council on Aging.
No, I'm saying a joint meeting of like we had a few weeks ago of the Council on Aging and
that's fine.
Recalc. That'd be the easiest. That way we can leverage the most more efficiently.
That's fine. And I just wanted to share some words of wisdom if they help anyone here, and then I'm going to have to jump off. But thank you very much for indulging me tonight. I struggle a lot with how do you define need and want for senior services. And the reason I believe that there even are discussions about needing things for senior services, like a division, a department or a building or whatever, is that as people get older, they are genuinely a distinct part of the population, not by virtue of the fact that they're retired, but by virtue of the fact that people become more frail, less able to engage in community in the way that they used to when they were younger. And they genuinely have needs to keep them engaged and involved. And the deafness is a good example. And for sight, Braille, I mean, really, sending out notices in Braille to households is not an unreasonable thing. I think it's great. We tonight added closed captioning. That just should be a given. But part of it seems that there is, and I believe it's a legal obligation of public office everywhere to meet basic needs of the elder population. Then there's a separate question. There are people who are older who may not yet have any special needs, but we would like to have a community center because it would be a really nice thing that would engage everyone in the community. It may or may not have a massive effect on someone's quality of life, but there's a good portion of people, and as they get older, it's more acute, that really need the service. And we need to go the extra mile to find ways to reach them, to find out about them, because it's kind of a catch-22. The reason we need to get them is it's not so easy for them to engage and tell us what they want to read, even to know what they might want or what might be possible. So we have to get to them. And if we don't, we'll think they're not there. And then we get biased data. So separating that need from want in the older population, I think is a real struggle, because where it's need, I don't think there's an issue. What we have to do is figure out how to quantify what the need is and are we meeting it. And my favorite one is that we've got 2 parking places that are handicapped at the senior center for 7,000 people over age 65. I mean, come on now. Grocery stores do a better job than that. But beyond that is a perfectly reasonable, legitimate thing of what would we like to have for the community, because we want Reading to be a great community. But it's not necessarily the same set of questions for those 2 sets of people. And I struggle with this all the time. I don't have an easy answer, but when we talk about things like one survey, maybe not. Maybe there are 2, depending on target audiences. Maybe there are 5. I don't know. There's probably not budget to fine tune it that much, but I just caution not to take what we can do and assume it hits all those categories of target audiences, because I think they're quite different. And I think that it addresses different community obligations and community perks, really. I mean, it's nice to have parks. It's nice to have trails. I love the library. We don't have to have all those things to live. But there are people that need help as they get older, and especially to keep them engaged, that I think really is an obligation of public office. So I throw it out just as something to mull over. If somebody's got any way to sort it out, that would be great. But just like it's not fair to want to know what women want, because there's 7 billion subdivisions of women and there's 7 billion divisions of men, there's not one what the elders want.
Okay, Mark.
And if I could just, we talked a little bit about this last night at the Council on Aging meeting also. And one of the things I had suggested is that given recalc scope and given the consultant's scope in the project, I think there are a lot more things that we want to talk about than probably we're going to be able to cover in this particular activity, even in terms of getting more community input and more engagement and things like that. And one of the things that I thought might make sense is, well, first of all, let's see how far we can get where we have commonality, right? That's our goal. But if there are things that are beyond, if you will, maybe it makes sense to engage UMass or someone else to work more directly with the council on some, whether it's an outreach program, again, back to kind of, full engagement of each of the individual groups. Maybe that's a bigger activity that still needs to happen, but it's not funded in the 40 grand, that we have here to kind of accomplish our first goal. And if that's the case, maybe this is a way to kind of meet these folks, understand if that is something that could be could create a scope for that. And then again, we'll have to go through a separate process for it, but maybe that's something that we're also asking for, is a way to really dig in very deep. And maybe the council is the right vehicle for that. I don't think we want to let this, my concern is I don't think we need to listen very carefully, but I'm a little concerned that we could spend months and kind of stop the momentum. And I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do here. I think it's not, hey, let's just hurry up and get something done. It's not that at all. But, this has been an issue for a very long time in the community. And I think now it's starting to build some momentum. And I would just encourage us to build from that momentum and carry it forward.
No, I agree. I think that's great, Mark. Where there's low hanging fruit of things we can do, like making surveys are in really big font so that seniors can read them and things like that. We just need to be mindful of, there's a group that has extra needs to participate for us to get a basic representative survey that's got some validity to it.
And not just survey, but I think so there are going to be some focus groups that Jean showed that are part of that outreach effort also. So there are built in some forums, and to make them accessible is a really important priority, clearly.
Yeah, and with sign language people in them and things like that too.
Well, so we got closed captions.
More low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, we got closed captions to work just as kind of
I know, I'm so
by clicking
excited.
the
It's
button.
wonderful. All it took was my mentioning it. Look, we fixed it. It's that simple with a lot of this stuff. So anyway, thank you very much. I have to jump off. You're doing great work. Thank you. And you'll probably hear more from me. But anyway, bye-bye.
Okay. Now getting back to, concrete actions that we can take. I certainly don't want to leave the meeting without having a firm idea of who's doing what when. Yeah, John Sasso.
So, John, I just go back to I guess the four things that I kind of jotted down on my side. And, in no particular order, although there is some implied order. I'd like us to solicit from each member of the committee questions that we would like, that we feel are relevant to ask were we to go visit a center, be it a senior center or a multi-generational center, if you will, or community center. And so I think one action would be to have folks, put together, brainstorm it doesn't have to be a long list, but a short list of questions, and send it to one person to consolidate and present at the next meeting for us to review. The second action in my mind would be if we could ask, I'm sorry, Kurt, or I apologize, I forget the name again. I just went blank. To solicit from the other communities the information that they might already have that they could share with us on their.
Kevin's right.
Kevin, I'm sorry, I apologize, Kevin. Sorry, Kevin. If we can solicit existing information, so we could take a look at that to add to our, again, as Mark was reading off the objectives, one of them is to know, well, what other processes did exist? How did they do it? Is this something we can do? And so I think having any of that information to look at would be helpful. And then in conjunction with that, kind of a action A, action B, sub-action is to decide if that particular center or community would be a good candidate for us to go visit. And then, setting up, getting a connection and getting somebody on our community to volunteer to go visit that. And then, so those three actually are somewhat related, and I guess kind of need to be done in that, or at least in that order or similar to that order. And then the last action, which I think is which is a larger action in some respects, is I think it'd be helpful to pull together, based on all of the discussions we've had thus far, based on all of the feedback we've solicited, based on the communications we've had with the Council on Aging, based on what we know of what's been done in the past, I would like us to put together, I guess, what I will call an input document to the consultant. And it could have questions, it could have information, it could have guidance for the types of things we want to ask about, but information that we could use as a basis for sharing and getting some feedback from the consultant on their perspectives on, are these the things that we want to do? I mean, an example, I'll give you an example. An example would just simply be that, hey, as part of the survey, we really think it's important that you have pictures so people can see what we're talking about. So, I mean, very basic, simple stuff like that to the question of, hey, do you think it's important that, we have multi-use rooms and be able to do multiple programs at different levels or whatever. I mean, to come up with some things that we can put in front of the consultant that in a cohesive way, which is why I would say, again, each of us should put together our list and send that to somebody to consolidate and put forward for us to review. And maybe that's the list, by the way, that we review with the COA as well, to kind of help facilitate that process so we don't get bogged down in a long and drawn out perspective. So those are the four actions that I've identified. And again, as I said, I'd be willing to take one of the consolidation actions as an OPR for that. And if someone else would take one of the other ones, and then at our next meeting to review those, I think that would be a reasonable approach. So you guys can tell me what you think.
Comments before Yes, Michael.
I thought that was very, very coherent and clear. And unfortunately, I was writing notes, and I think I missed your second point. But
the reports, Kevin had referenced that he had access to already reports. Okay, from other communities. Any other comments?
So for me,
Yeah.
one of the ways I like to keep things moving is to, rather than emailing things around back and forth, like if Kevin has the reports, he could just post them on the website. And that saves a lot of trouble. Just like we had the peer communities data on there since November, the scope of work has been on there since November. If we can just do that and whatever he's got posted on the website, then that's done.
Which website is this now?
The Recalc project website.
Okay, all right.
It's under Elder Human Services. Pleasant. You go to Elder Human Services, Pleasant Street Center, and then it's a button under there. But all this information that we've been collecting, we've posted it there, and then that way it's live.
Okay. As far as the list of questions that would be standardized, that we would ask of all of the centers that are visited, I'd be willing to take that information and consolidate it. So if people would send me an email with their list, and then I'd have that. I would try. If you could get it to me within the next week, then I would try to have it for you before we convene, so that we can then have another look at it and finalize it, hopefully. And so John, if you would take, John Sasso would take the last, the consolidation of the consolidation of information as to be to be submitted to the consultant.
Yeah, so let me just jump in real quick, John, if I can. Again, we've met now a couple times and we've put together some information already in some of the minutes and notes. But I think we also, all of us have some different views and perspectives that we've kind of collected over the last few weeks. I would ask that people, feel free to jot down their thoughts and ideas about, if you were gonna sit down with the consultant and give them some input on the types of questions we were going to ask, the way in which we convey the information, anything that you think would be relevant within the scope of the work. Send me that stuff and I'll try to consolidate it as best I can. I'll go back to the minutes that we've already drafted as well and try to pull things out of there. And again, my goal is to present this to everybody and let you guys hack at it. But I think if we, put it together in a consolidated fashion, it'll make it easier. And one of the things that I'd like to do is try to segregate it by input type, like the types of questions, the way in which we ask them, so that there's a bit more, organization to the information as well. So it can be more readily digested. Some of it might be directly relevant and some of it might not be. So.
And I think that would be helpful in our preparation for both meeting with the select board and then later on with the a presentation, either written and or oral to the town meeting.
So John, I know you have my email. If you can send it, if people don't already have it, so you can send that out to the group, or if you.
I think it's on the invite.
It's on the invite. Okay, that's right. It's on the invite. Okay, so my email's on the invite. So by all means, please feel free to share. So yeah, I if you get that to me in the next week, then I can certainly get that consolidated in time for our next meeting. I'm assuming we're meeting 2 weeks. Well, we haven't decided, but I'm assuming 2 weeks from tonight is probably what I was suspecting. But I guess we need to talk about that.
Jean.
Yeah, if I could, John.
Yes.
I just, since Kevin and I are meeting with the consultant on Tuesday, I just want to make sure I'm clear on what's been discussed here tonight. The consultant is budgeted for 4 meetings with Recalc. It sounds like, from what Marilyn said, there's an expectation that the Council on Aging should be at the table when then there's discussion about I'm going to say a draft survey. So a combined Council on Aging Recalc meeting on the draft survey, once the consultant has got that going, would that make sense to be one of the 4 meetings that everyone can have a say on a draft survey? Does that seem like?
I'm looking at Michael's, John's saying yes, Michael's
Okay.
saying.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then there'll be 3 other times when the consultant will be available to meet with Recalc. And you don't have to say right now, what you think that might be, but maybe we can get into that a little bit more next time. I'll have a little bit more to report out on our meeting with the consultant, but if there's anything else that seems like a natural connection here to the group, I just wanted to bring that up now.
Okay.
So we'll just put a pin in that. And then if the group is gonna meet in 2 weeks, that's February vacation week, the 23rd.
That's what I was wondering, if that's going to be a problem for people.
Yeah, Kevin's not available that week, and so that's a problem.
What do people? Well, first of all, to what Jean is saying is that, does that make sense to everybody to have, of the 4 meetings, to have the one when we talk about this, the survey, have it be a joint meeting with the COA? Okay, and let me see. Mark was the only one I didn't have pictures that's all right. So
You got a harumph out of me.
okay. So that's a go. So, and if there's no objections, we'll have both the questions emailed to me and input as to key components that we want to see put before the consultants, sent in some kind of cohesive fashion. That doesn't mean we're not going to have, good conversations and meetings with them, but this hopefully will jumpstart that, put us a little further ahead.
And John, this is Ron.
Yeah, sure.
I'm willing to put together a form. So when we do go visit some of the centers, people use the same form to enter information. So it's collected. We can use something like Microsoft Forms or something like that. Here's the URL. You go visit this center. What center did you visit? Who went to visit it? And here are the questions, the standard questions that are for that visit, and people fill out that information. John, you being a project manager, you're probably used to something like that, but.
That's great, Ron. I certainly more than willing to accept that that offer. That would be outstanding. It saves a lot of time, and then everybody gets this. Be able to, we be able to post it. Then everybody will be able to see it. It'll be okay. That's great.
I thought there was an issue. I apologize to jumping in, but I thought there was an issue with putting stuff all in one place that we were working on from a meeting law perspective. Is that?
Yeah, I did. So I don't know about that.
I don't know. Mark or Jean, maybe you can tell us if that's.
That is a problem. Yes. Yeah. But you can certainly have it as a discussion at the meeting.
Right.
And then distribute it, the template.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
I don't think the template's the problem. I think is what I suggested as far as the results. Is that what you're saying, John Sasso?
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I just was distracted for a minute, but I think that the idea of a template as the output is absolutely what we want to share. The only reason I was suggesting that we email individually information to either John or I is that if we can't actually work collaboratively on a Google Doc, for example, that's a violation of open meeting law. So I think that's what we're trying to avoid. If everybody wants to send inputs to John and I for the items we just talked about and do that individually, single email, that's not a violation. But it's just so I think that was the challenge, Ron. So, but all means
this was for the input when you go visit a center.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
To fill it, yes.
It's like an interview document.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that you fill it online, and we get all the responses from everybody and provide an output of that afterwards.
I can't. Well, I don't know. Again, I can't see that necessarily being an issue, but I don't know. Maybe.
If it's easier when you do the interview and get the form filled in, if it's easier to give that to staff and we compile it and then just make it available to the group in a packet, we can do that.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Gene. It's exactly the way to do it.
Okay.
I will talk to the chair of the select board and request a time slot for the March 22nd meeting.
Okay.
And who's going to do the presentation?
I guess that will be me. Is that going to be live by then, do you think, Ron? Or, Mark? Don't know. Yeah.
Next week is hybrid, so it could be.
Okay.
Is it hybrid?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Oh, we'll know when it's posted on tomorrow.
In the inside scoop.
Yep, John Sasso.
Can we, if we're done with, can we talk a little bit back, circle back on next meeting for a minute?
Yes. Yes.
I I mean, I would hate, I think we're barreling down the road here and we've got to Mark's earlier point, momentum. I don't want to rush anything, but at the same time, I want to keep making progress. Is it at all possible to meet before the vacation? Like the end of that week, like that Thursday or Friday? Which would be, I don't know if we have enough time, but even if it was a short meeting, that'd be the 17th or 18th of February, which is actually the end of next week. So it's really only a week and a day or two. Because otherwise we're looking at, the 2nd of March.
What about during the day that next week? Fridays, we're closed, so that's a little tricky.
There's
I mean,
also-
my during the days are much easier than my evenings, believe it or not. So, but not everybody has that luxury. So I think it really depends on the rest of the committee.
Well, the Council on Aging has something going on the 17th at 4:30 in the afternoon, so it would make it tough on me. But Friday's fine, but Fridays doesn't work for Gene and other people. Sometime before this meeting's over, I'd just like to throw out some thoughts that maybe necessarily do or do not have to do with this meeting, but overall in general.
Okay, sure. How about the Monday? Well, it's only
How about Thursday, next
Yeah.
Thursday, 4 to 5? Just to get on a meeting real quick. How's that sound?
I
I
can't
could
do
do
it.
it.
Can't.
and also the other thing is we have
Wednesday?
have to have everything submitted 3 days in advance, the agenda and everything.
2 days.
2 days? Oh, okay. Oh, but Friday doesn't count.
Could we do next Wednesday?
Pre-town meeting next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Are you saying during the day or in the evening?
I'm free all the time,
Like
except when I forget things.
would Wednesday midday work on the 16th?
Yeah.
Well, it's more, as I don't know about John Sasso, but if we're supposed to get the information, assuming people get the information to us, like within the next 2 days kind of thing.
Yeah, I would, if we were going to do something next week or next Wednesday, I would really like inputs by the weekend so that I can spend a little bit of time kind of consolidating it and getting it ready. I mean, I think the agenda for the next meeting is review the questions, review the information. I mean, that's the basic, and maybe, make sure we have a good outline for the select board meeting. But other than that, it's for you, John and I, we need to get, if we're going to do a meeting next Wednesday or anytime next week, we really need the feedback, within the next couple of days, certainly before the weekend or, by Saturday from my perspective.
If it's easier for everyone to meet on Wednesday, the 23rd, Amy and I can continue to come and we'll just fill Kevin in if that's easier. And gives everybody a little more breathing room.
Fine for me.
That's fine with me, yeah.
Evening, the 23rd?
Yeah.
So the 7 o'clock time frame?
Yeah.
Works for me.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. And now John Parsons, you wanted to bring up something?
Just a couple of thoughts that I'd like to throw out for people to think about or whatever. To me, the most important things that happen at the senior center or the Pleasant Street Center is what the nurse advocate does and what the senior counselor does. And we talk about swimming pools and gyms and all this other stuff. I want people to keep in mind that if they're thinking about what they're going to be doing with a new center, it's very important that what facilities are available to those people. I don't know if everybody on this committee has been to the senior center. If they haven't, I wish they would. Some people here, I think that the Council on Aging has far more power than it does. The Council on Aging basically has no say in the programs that go on at the senior center. That is totally done by elder services. We are basically an advisory group and a group that is able to contribute money to special programs. And just something else I'd like to say, I think it was John O'Neill that pointed this out. This is the senior center is not just inadequate, it's an embarrassment. It really is. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. A question to you, John Parsons, while I think of it. I've thought of it before, but it keeps on slipping my mind. Have people ever talked at the Council on Aging about setting up a Friends of the Council? That's what a lot of communities have done. So then they can solicit funds, donations.
That has been thought, it's been talked about a couple of times, and I've often thought myself, even if I was a little bit younger, I think I would get off the council and go set up a Friends. But at my age, I think that's a little bit more than I could take on right now.
Okay, sure. No, just was wondering, because that is the vehicle that, just like there's the Friends of the Library.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of communities do for their centers as well.
It was just brought up at the Monday meeting.
Pardon me?
It was just brought up at the Monday night meeting, actually.
Okay.
And a question I would have probably could answer by Gene. Could the council go out and raise money? And the reason I asked that question, when we had the celebration for the 25th year, we went out and raised money. Whether we were legally, as far as the town was concerned, supposed to do that or not, I don't know. But what are the restrictions for us going out and doing stuff like that?
Well, I know there's a lot of restrictions on employees. And as a member of a board, committee, and commission, you are an employee. So I would defer to the expert legal counsel on the technicality of that. But I would say that is why Friends groups are created,
Right.
so that they have that latitude and they can get away from the role of an employee. We are told in no uncertain terms, we are not to go solicit for donations. Anything like that is way
But
off.
also, Gene, one of the other reasons is that foundations cannot give to the municipalities.
Yeah.
But so they have to give it to, and a lot of banks, who are mandated to give monies to local charities. They couldn't give it directly to the council, but they could give it to a Friends.
So why don't we totally forget about the fact that I mentioned what we solicited for that and burn the list?
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Well, that was faster than the thumbs moving on that one.
Is there any other business?
good.
I mean, we have the next meeting.
We have
and
the
you
next
have our
meeting.
assignments to get information to myself and to John Sasso. Oh, Gene?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everyone, if they have been paying attention to what's going on in the city of Newton. I know we're not Newton, but I'm very much interested in their process. And they are having a public forum virtually on November 17th. I've already signed up for it. I think Amy might have as well. I'm interested in seeing where they're at. It's ironic. Their proposal is to demolish an existing building where the center is, which is a historic property, and put up a very large almost 3 stories on one side building that takes up the whole site in a residential neighborhood. So it is a fascinatingly
$16
similar.
million, right?
Yes, it's, and the caveat is they've gone this far with the idea and with the vision. And there's in small print at the bottom, if anybody doesn't think this is a good idea, if people think it's a bad idea, we'll go back to the drawing board. So I thought, I gotta see this. I don't know how much they've spent already. I think a lot,
If it's
And,
anything like Newton North High School, it's going to be done in marble, Italian marble, probably.
There was a write-up about this in the Globe this week. I
Right.
forget if it was
Yes.
Monday or Tuesday. I think it was, or maybe it was
Sunday.
It
Sunday.
was Sunday. It was
Local.
Sunday.
It
Yeah.
was Sunday.
Sunday,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
it.
so if anybody's interested, you just Google recalc Newton. I'm sorry, new calc Newton. And I know, and you can get all the details and.
So it's interesting, even though they called it a Center for
Active
Active
living.
Living, which certainly captured my attention, it was a matter of when they described it was seniors.
I think it was a little tiny bit of other stuff too, but
But-
seniors, I think, were the focus with community use as well, as it would allow.
Are you sure it was in Sunday's paper? I didn't see that. Is everybody?
Um,
Sunday or Monday?
Yeah, it was in the Globe.
I know there was.
John, I-
Yesterday, I know it was before, it wasn't yesterday. I thought it
John
was-
Parsons, I have a copy. I can make you a copy. Someone had cut me out a hard copy and then my dad also saw it, so I can give you a copy if you want.
Well, if I don't find it, I'll ask you for it on Friday when I'm down there.
Okay.
Thank
got
you.
it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay,
Um,
Mark?
John, so one other thing back to select board and expectations and things like that. One of the other things that the select board is discussing is open land or available land or buildable land. And so there are discussions that are starting about, gee, what are we going to do with the property by Oakland Road? What are we going to do by Simon's Way? Which are the two biggest that are available. So that you may hear your ears perking up a little bit, because as those discussions start to go on, there'll be a discussion of, gee, what might we do with those locations? What might be the right things to do? So I just wanted to make you folks aware that there may be a little jingle that comes from that, because as we talk about land, I'll certainly talk about what I think some of the needs are for the land.
Okay. Is there any further new business? Let's see, make sure I get to see everybody there.
Oh,
All
sorry.
right.
One other question, just in terms of timing for the future meetings.
Yep.
We're going to start to get into the FinCom review cycle. So like Wednesday, March 2nd is the budget review. And the 9th is a budget review. And the 16th is a budget review. So I may just have to not go to some budget reviews. Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Okay, now let's take a
I
motion.
I also have to be at the finance committee at least 2 Wednesdays out of the month in March, so.
Okay. We're not limited to Wednesday, I don't believe, so anyway. But we'll certainly address that. So we're all set for the next meeting. So now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, and I see a second.
Second,
Okay, and now, so we'll poll Ron Assini,
Yes.
Michael Coltman,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
John Parsons,
Yes.
John Sasso,
yes.
John O'Neill, yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.